That'll allow us to kind of rotate around a little bit quicker and move in and out a little bit quicker. So I've kind of modified the shape of this since the last lesson. I've gone ahead and I kind of raised his head up a little bit, tweaked the mouth just a little bit, added a little bit more length here, kind of thickened up his arm. So feel free to do whatever you want. As far as making it look like you want it to look, it's more for demonstration purposes. So from this point, let's say that we want to now add some sort of higher res detail for the skin. It's pretty smooth up here. So one of the things that we can do is I'll simply use the sculpt draw, and then we can come down to texture and just very simply hit new, and it'll create automatically some noise that we can use. So if we just use this noise as is, you can see it gives us kind of some bumpiness across the surface, but you can see it kind of repeats there. So we can come down to stroke and change how that's applied. So right now it's got a certain amount of spacing. We could, increase the amount of spacing. It kind of breaks it up a little bit. We could probably also come in and take the strength of it down a little bit because we don't want it to be overpowering. And so we could come in and start to add some bumpiness that way. Okay. We can also change our stroke to anchored, and that will allow us to draw out individual copies of the noise. If we want to be very specific and put it in a very specific spot, we can do it that way. So we can come across like that. We can also, if we get something like dots, we could increase this jitter, and that will allow us to kind of jitter this across the surface. So you can see there, you actually get a preview of it, but I can kind of jitter this and it varies the position of it. Take that down a little bit more, and let's take our strength down a little bit as well. But now we can kind of jitter that, and it's a very quick way to add just some overall kind of roughness to the model here. So just adding that little bit of variation to any of those smooth surfaces really helps make it look, even though this is more cartoony, make it look a little bit more realistic or bring a little bit more life to it. Now to edit your noise that it's using, you can come over to texture, and right now you can see we're using just some clouds, but you can go into the type and you can change the type that you want to use. Use this Voronoi, or you could use any of these types of noise will get you a kind of a different result. So you come down here and you can use distorted noise, and that will give you this kind of real wavy kind of a look, which would be something really different from what you just put on. So you could change your stroke and kind of try it out, and maybe because it has this sort of veiny kind of look, it might be good to put down in some of these areas down here. Just kind of add a little bit of detail there. Keep in mind, remember, you can also push into the surface, so we could hold Control down and make that more of like an indentation there. Maybe along the the sides where this comes down under the body, maybe these are some more like really fine sort of wrinkles coming in here. And so we could just, using this anchored, and as I turn the brush, I can sort of rotate that around so we don't get the the exact same copy of it. And so by overlapping these, we can get some really good results. And obviously you're going to want to spend more time on this than our 7 minutes at a time in getting this to look right. And so just save out some iterations, do some experimenting, and try and see what works for you in getting the look that you want to get. So we can start to overlap this, and then you could, if you wanted to do like a more of an overall look, you could change the jitter position for these, and use some of those other strokes to drop them across the whole surface. But I kind of like, coming in and adding specific copies in certain areas. So you can get something like that. And just adding that little bit of variation in there, I think will really help. We can come in maybe along just the mouth here, and really concentrate more on the areas that, would be folding and the soft tissues kind of folding in on itself, where there's a lot of movement. So not beautiful sculpting, but you kind of get the idea where you can kind of drop these textures in. And so you can change those noise patterns right over here. And you can also, once you select one of these, there's also settings down here that you can change as far as the size. And all the noises that you can get are going to have, some slightly different settings that you're able to use. So once you've got something done with your the sort of, and you can see it turns back and we see the low res now. So let's choose our modifier, and in the preview, we can just bump this up if we want to see this a little bit closer to the sculpted result. Now, if we want to add a material to this to change the color, we can go select the body. We'll go over to this kind of shaded sphere here, and let's create a new material. I'm just going to call this something like body material. We can come down and change the color by going into diffuse and choosing the swatch. We can choose maybe like a green, and then you can change the RGB values here, or go to HSV and take out some of the saturation of it, maybe darken it a little bit. You can also change the specularity, so that's this shininess here. We could make it a color if we wanted to. So maybe something like that, or we could increase the intensity. We can also change the hardness, so make it a broader spec versus a harder spec, and it all will help kind of give you different looks that you might want for your objects. And you can see kind of a preview here. If you want to see it on different kinds of objects, you can select that. Okay, let's go ahead and choose the teeth. You can see now the teeth, we don't have any materials, so we'll choose new. And I'm just going to call this one teeth that, and leave it white. You can change kind of the different shader types in here if you want to. You can also, again, change the specularity and so forth. Also, if you want something that is completely shaded, this we'll look at in a second. So if you don't want any of that shading on it, you've got settings for that down here. Transparency and that sort of thing. So all of your different material attributes you can change down here. Let's go back to the eye, and I want to create a new material, and let's call this eye main. And let's come in, and I'm just going to add just a little bit of, I think, pink to it. Okay, so something like that. And let's kind of move in here, and I'm actually going to come in on the other side. Since we're using this, we're actually mirroring this. Okay, so this material is being applied to the whole thing. It's probably maybe a little bit more white we need. Okay, we can increase the intensity of it. We could come in and add, let's come down and add the ambience. And I think I want to change that actually to emission. So for this one, instead of the ambience, we want to change emit, and you can see how that's sort of glowing. It's kind of self-illuminating. And so I just want to brighten that up just a little bit. I'm not going to take it too far, but I just want those eyes to kind of pop out a little bit. Now we have two other kind of colors that we want to add to this. So, you can see we can come into edit mode, and we can select, faces here. Let's say we'll kind of select these all the way around. Let's go into select, and we can select more, which will give us that sort of outer rim. Okay, and then we can create a new material, and let's call this one pupil that, and let's make it black. And for the spec, let's take the spec off. We can make that shadeless, so it's pretty much just a black void. Okay, let's go ahead and assign, and we can assign that just to those faces, so we don't have to assign material to a complete object. So we can come in here now, and let's select where the iris would be. Selecting all the way around. Let's grow that selection or select more. So Control and then numpad plus will do the same thing. Let's create a new material here, and let's call this one iris, and let's give it a color. So let's give it maybe, I don't know, like an orange, something like that. And let's make this one shadeless too, so it's just sort of looks like that. So now all we have to do is assign it there. Go back to object mode, and you can see that we've got multiple materials here assigned to a single object. So that lets us get our overall eye color, as well as our pupil and the iris color. And as you can see, all three of those materials listed there. If I select the body, you're just seeing the body, but you could do the same thing where you had different materials assigned to different faces. There's the teeth, and then the eye, we have these three different materials, and we can go in and modify each of these materials to change. For instance, if we wanted to change the iris color, it'd be simple to come in here and change up the color to make the eyes a different color. Okay, so that's a look at kind of adding some simple materials. Let's finish up by just adding a cup floor, and I'm just going to scale this up, hitting the S key to do that. Now we already have a camera in our scene, and one of the things we can do, we can just go to view and we can see where that camera is. If we come to here, and you can see it's over here on this side. You can also see that the number pad 0 will take you to that. So let's go ahead and kind of position where we want. So let's say I want to come more, I don't know, sort of, I don't know, over here maybe. And we want our camera to be over in this area. So we can use Control-Alt-0 to kind of add that in. We can also hit R if we want to sort of rotate. Oops, let me make sure to select the camera. Make sure your camera's selected, then you can hit R, and you can kind of roll the camera around. You can also change the axis by hitting R, and then let's change, go to Y and Y again, and we can do the Y axis. Okay, so let's pull out a little bit and hit that again, so we've got something more like that. Now we'll go to render, and in order to render, we're just going to use Blender Render. You can hit this button right here. By default, it's going to display it in our image editor, so it's going to switch this over to an image editor view, and it's going to render that up based on the resolution settings that we have down here. So we have some pretty big, 1080p basically. So it's going to render that out. So you can see we've got this large black area. So the position of the lamps aren't really working too well for us. So let's position those and maybe add another one. So let's come in and we'll go back to our kind of our 3D view here. I can move out of that. And so the lamp that we have right now, you can see is right here, and it's kind of pointing straight down. We can edit it by coming over here. We can change the amount of energy. We can change the the color of it if we wanted to make it a little bit more yellow. You can see the type of lamp that it is. So right now it's a point. Okay, we also have sun, spot, hemisphere, and area. So let's add another point lamp. So let's come over to create, and I'm going to create another point. Okay, and this one, let's kind of move over and up. Now if we render this out, F12 will render, and it'll actually go back and render that camera view, so we don't have to keep going back to the camera view before we render. So now we're getting a little bit more light under there. Well, let's dial that point light down a little bit. So on the energy, let's take this down to maybe 0.5 or so. Okay. Let's add another one. And for this one, let's kind of bring it up over to the side here underneath. And let's make this one maybe 0.3. So we'll take the energy down for that one as well. Oops. And you can also set, for all of these, you can set shadows just by clicking on these. Let's do a quick render and see what that looks like. So again, F12. So from here you can start tweaking, getting more shadows in here to kind of ground it on the floor. You can look at the material and see what you need to do to tweak the material. You can see some of the faceting here. So maybe on the eyes, you want to have a little bit more detail there. So this is one of the things to keep in mind. On your subsurf modifiers, you have the subdivisions for view and for render. So right now we're, in the preview, we're looking at it at a higher res than actually when we render it. That's kind of the opposite of what we want. So we want to make sure at least to render it to the same value that we have, that we're looking at. Same thing here for the teeth. So we would want to, increase that amount as well, because you can kind of see the lines coming in here. So obviously not a great render, but we just want to learn how to kind of where the buttons are, what we need to do to get our pictures out, and then we can start to go through techniques for getting good renders and what those need to look like, and kind of setting up the 3-point lighting and things like that. So the purpose of this course is really just to kind of get you through one kind of small project from start to finish in a very short amount of time, so that then you can go back and start to learn about the specific areas that you're more interested in. And so if you're more interested in modeling, and we went through mainly modeling because that's kind of an easier project to go through, building this up and doing the sculpting and then doing some simple materials and texturing. But there's so much that you can do here in Blender as far as the animation and dynamics, and there's just so much stuff. So, if you've gone through this and you like working in Blender, then I'd encourage you to kind of check out kind of some of the other training. And we have more modeling training right now, but as we go through this process of ramping up with Blender, you're going to start to see more and more courses that are going to cover those different aspects of Blender, because obviously it's a great price point to be able to get this for free. And so the resources that we're going to be putting out for the different aspects of Blender will come in time, so make sure to keep an eye out for those. So I hope you've enjoyed